The BBC and the British Academy Film Awards, BAFTA, both issued apologies today after broadcasting racial slurs shouted during yesterday's award show. It happened while two prominent black actors, Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, were on stage. While the awards host apologized live, the full show, including the uncensored slur, remained briefly available to watch even after the broadcast. Now, the slur was shouted by John Davidson. He's a Tourette syndrome campaigner who was at the ceremony for the movie I Swear, which is inspired by his challenges living with Tourette's. Davidson has since apologized, saying he was deeply mortified and that his tics are not reflective of him or his beliefs. So some have questioned how BBC handled the incident. Advocates for those living with Tourette syndrome have called for understanding. So we wanted to take a closer look at this neurodevelopmental disorder and how it manifests itself. And so let's bring in Tamara Pringsheim, a neurologist and professor at the University of Calgary, also the program lead at the Tourette Syndrome and Pediatric Movement Disorders Clinic. Thank you very much for joining us. You were talking about this incident with your assistant over lunch today. What was your reaction to what happened?
Well, obviously, this is a very difficult situation for everyone involved. John Davison is, while I don't know him personally and I'm not part of his care team, he has a very severe case of Tourette syndrome and has suffered almost his entire life living with the impacts of having severe symptoms. And so I can only imagine the difficulty for everybody in the auditorium and for John himself when this happened.
I think most of us don't really understand Tourette, and we probably think we do. So we have a limited amount of time, but why don't you take us through a few of the basics? So you've seen thousands of patients with this disorder, and how does it most commonly manifest itself?
Yeah, so Tourette syndrome is a childhood onset neurological condition that is characterized by involuntary movements and sounds. So we call these tics. And motor tics, the most common motor tics we see are eye blinking, eye movements, nose movements, mouth movements. And the most common phonic tics that we see are throat clearing, sniffing, and coughing. And these symptoms wax and wane and change over time. For some people, tics improve in late adolescence, but about a quarter of our patients continue to have symptoms their whole life. There are medical and behavioral therapies that can significantly improve symptoms for some patients.
And as we're speaking to you, we're seeing some still pictures of the gentleman who shouted out the racial slur, who is, as I understand it, the subject of a documentary, which is why he was at the Film Awards. So what about those situations? So how common is it for someone with Tourette's to shout out a swear word or a slur or some other inappropriate word? And more to the point, why do they do it?
Yeah. So about 10% of people at any one time with Tourette syndrome will have coprolalia. So it's not a common symptom, but it's not rare. And often it's those situations where people feel that there's the most at risk, so sort of being in the spotlight, where the urge or the need to have these symptoms sort of rises to the surface. Now, I mean, tics are involuntary. People with Tourette syndrome experience an extreme, irresistible urge or compulsion to perform their tics. And the tics are in and of themselves meaningless. They're not an expression of a patient's wants or needs. They are meaningless and purposeless, other than to resolve this extreme feeling of tension or need to make the movement. Many of my patients will tell me that in situations where they feel like they need to be quiet, like a library or writing an exam, that's when their vocal tics are actually the worst, because it brings it to mind. And the more somebody's thinking about it or trying to suppress it, the more irresistible the urge becomes.
One last thing, and I so appreciate your insight into this, but you know, he used a racial slur with two black actors on stage. And so I think a lot of us wonder, is what's happened here, is that revealing his kind of deepest true feelings or not? Why, and I know you're not part of his care team, but why would somebody go there? Why would they shout that out as opposed to shouting out stupid or stop or the F word?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what people fear, that there is an intention to hurt or harm through this tic. But tics in Tourette syndrome are involuntary. I remember the first time that I met a patient with Tourette syndrome, and I was, sitting behind my desk, and someone and this patient started yelling racial slurs and sexist remarks against me. And I'm a human being, and when we hear certain words, they're going to bring up emotions. And there was a moment where I felt offended, where I felt threatened, but it only took another moment to realize that this person had no intention to harm me or to injure me with these phrases, that they were meaningless, and that he didn't believe these things about me. And I think that's really hard in the moment, right? You can't have that conversation when it happens. So it takes reflection and discussion after the event occurs to really understand why it occurred. And so I can certainly understand people feeling upset, people feeling offended, threatened by what happened. But I sincerely believe that Mr. Davidson intended no harm, that he suffers from a severe neurological condition. And like I said, this man has suffered most of his life, and has been physically assaulted for his symptoms in the past. And, I think he has expressed his remorse.
Yeah, he certainly has. And I really appreciate the conversation that we're having with you. Tamara Pringsheim is a neurologist and professor at the University of Calgary. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.